welcome to Simpler Bible, a daily journey to biblical understanding. All right, for episode 107 today, we're going to look at two more Psalms, Psalm 49 and 50. Psalm 49 is another psalm of the sons of Korah, and Psalm 50, a psalm of Asaph. Both of these guys, the sons of Korah and Asaph, each contributed about 10. The sons of Korah, it's a little over 10, but anyway, it's around 10 each. So not a lot of the Psalms, but a fair chunk. They're kind of like second place behind David. So David wrote the majority of the Psalms, and then there's a whole bunch of them that we don't know who wrote. Anyway, this one I've titled today, Psalm 49 and 50, Man Will Not Remain, and you'll see why here in just a moment. Let's begin in Psalm 49, verse 1. Hear this, all peoples. Give ear, all inhabitants of the world, both low and high. So it's going to give us these contrasts, rich and poor together. My mouth shall speak wisdom. The meditation of my heart shall be understanding. I will incline my ear to a proverb. I will solve my riddle to the music of the lyre. Why should I fear in times of trouble when the iniquity of those who cheat surround me? Those who trust in their wealth and boast in the abundance of their riches. So these people who are cheaters, these people who boast in their riches, he goes, why should I fear in this time? And then he says this in verse 7, Truly no man can ransom another man or give to God the price of his life. For the ransom of their life is costly and can never suffice that he should live on forever and never see the pit. This is a really interesting verse. And I love it because I think that not only are there some practical implications, but there's some spiritual implications. So he talks about how here that there are people who trust in their wealth, they trust in their riches, they trust in their position in life. And then he says, verses 7 through 9, no man can give God the ransom price for his own life. No one can basically buy their own life from God so that they would live forever and never see the pit, never go down to Sheol. In other words, everybody's going to die. You can't buy yourself out of death. You can't pay God an adequate price to save you from death. Now, the spiritual implication, of course, this is talking about a practical side, but the spiritual implication, of course, is that you and I cannot ransom our lives from eternal death either. There's no price that we can do. In fact, it makes me think of like Micah, where it says in Micah, what does the Lord require of you but to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God? And prior to that in Micah, he has said, that's Micah 6:8, but the two verses prior to that, he has said, what does the Lord require of me? Should I bring 10,000 offerings? Should I give 10,000 rivers of oil? Should I offer for my sin my firstborn son? No, but what does the Lord require of you? To do justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God. So a sacrifice apart from a heart connected to it has no value. And so there isn't any ransom you can give to God to spare you from going down to the pit. For God sees that even the wise die. The fool and the stupid alike must perish and leave their wealth to others. So we have the wise and the fool, the wise and the stupid both die. And then we go back up here, the low and the high both die. The rich and the poor both die. And it says, and they leave their wealth to others. Their graves are their homes forever. So you don't get to keep your land. You don't get to keep your house. Your grave is your forever home. Their dwelling places to all generations, though they called lands by their own names. And this is really interesting. So the idea here is if you name a piece of land after yourself, which is people do that, right? They buy a piece of land, they name it something maybe after themselves, put their name on it. And out here in West Texas, as you're driving, miles and miles between towns, you might see like a ranch with a big gate over it that says what kind of ranch it is. So even if you put your name on the land that you buy, you don't get to live forever. You don't remain forever. Like the land that you've put your name on it doesn't change the fact that you're going to still end up in the grave. Like you still are going to die. So man in his pomp, man in his arrogance does not remain. He is like a beast that perishes. So men live and then men die, and like animals die, so also men die. We come to nothing. And it says, this is the path of those who have foolish confidence, yet after them people approve of all their boast. So in other words, these people who build these empires and then go to the grave and they have their lands with their names on them, the people who come after them go, oh yeah, those guys were great. Look at their legacy. Look at everything they left behind. So what it's talking about here is that these are the kinds of people, I need you to catch the spiritual side of this. These are the kinds of people who are seeking to build a legacy in this life. Rich or poor, low or high, Wise or fool, you're coming to an end. Your life is coming to an end. And if you put your name on all the lands and all your businesses and all the things that you've accomplished, you're still going to find that your home is in the grave. You're still going to die. And then all the people who come after will go, oh yeah, let's boast and brag about the legacy of these people. But that's not our legacy. What does it go on to say? It says, they are like sheep appointed for Sheol, appointed for the grave. They're just heading into the grave. That's what they're going to do. Death shall be their shepherd, right? Remember in Psalm 23, the Lord is our shepherd. Death is the shepherd of these people, the people who are trying to make a legacy for themselves by their wealth. And the upright will rule over them in the morning. Their form shall be consumed in Sheol with no place to dwell. But pay attention to this, very, very key. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, and he will receive me. Okay, what have we seen a lot in the Psalms? The wicked and the righteous. The wicked are seeking to build a legacy for themselves out of their wealth. Verse 15 is going to turn a corner. But God will ransom my soul from the power of Sheol, for he will receive me. Be not afraid when man becomes rich, when the glory of his house increases. For when he dies, he carries nothing away. His glory does not follow down after him. You don't get to take it with you, okay? For though while he lives, he counts himself blessed, and though you get praise when you do well for yourself, his soul will go to the generation of his fathers, who will never again see the light. So if this is your lifestyle right now, if your mindset right now is, I've got to accumulate wealth, I've got to make a name for myself, I've got to be sure that I have a legacy that outlives me, you need to know that this is being talked about here in this Psalm, Psalm 49, that this is the legacy of the wicked, that the legacy of the wicked is that they come to nothing. They don't get to take anything with them. They're like sheep being led into the grave, and their shepherd is death, but not so the righteous, right? Man in his pomp, yet without understanding, is like a beast that perishes. So if you do not have the understanding of who God is, there's this little tiny phrase in here, but God will ransom my soul from Sheol. God will ransom my soul from the grave. And so don't be, if you're pursuing the Lord and you're seeking to be righteous, don't be concerned by the arrogance of the wicked. Don't get caught up. Don't look with envy on how the wicked are succeeding, and remember what happens to them in the end. This is Psalm 73 all over again, but we haven't even gotten to Psalm 73, although I've mentioned it twice as we've gone through the Psalms. You have to remember the end of the wicked, and you have to remember the end of the righteous. And the wicked is like a foolish beast that perishes if they live without understanding. And then Psalm 50 is a psalm of Asaph. And it says this, Psalm 50, beginning in verse 1, the mighty one God, the Lord, speaks and summons the earth from the rising of its sun to its setting. Out of Zion, the perfection of beauty, God shines forth. Our God comes, he does not keep silence. Before him is a devouring fire, and around him a mighty tempest. Devouring fire should make us think a little bit of Exodus, 19, and Hebrews 12. And maybe even Isaiah 33. So Exodus 19, the people see God on the mountain meeting with Moses, and the whole thing's covered in a devouring fire. Man, this should make us think of Leviticus 10, when the devouring fire consumed Nadab and Abihu. This should make us think of Numbers 16, when the devouring fire of God burned up Korah and his rebels. And so God is this devouring fire, right? He calls to the heavens above, to the earth, that he may judge his people. Gather to me my faithful ones who made a covenant with me by sacrifice. So God is calling for his people to be brought to him who made a covenant with him by sacrifice. And that makes me think of Matthew 26. I want to say verse 27, but don't hold me to that. Where Jesus holds the cup aloft and he says, this is my blood, this is the new covenant of my blood shed for you. And so we have been made people of covenant with God through the sacrifice of Jesus Christ. The heavens declare his righteousness, for God himself is judge. Hear, O my people, and I will speak. O Israel, I will testify against you. I am God, your God. Not for your sacrifices do I rebuke you. Your burnt offerings are continually before me. I will not accept a bull from your house or goats from your fold, for every beast of the forest is mine, the cattle on 1,000 hills. I know all the birds of the hills that move in the field are mine. If I were hungry, I would not tell you, for the world and its fullness are mine. Do I eat the flesh of the bulls or drink bloods of goats? Offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and perform your vows to the Most High. Call upon me in the day of trouble, and I will deliver you and you will glorify me. Now, this is important. This whole thought here, 7 through 15, the whole Bible is important, but I'm trying to make a point here. So he says here in verse 10, the cattle on 1,000 hills are mine. I own all the cattle on 1,000 hills. And what's interesting is this verse gets used a lot, and including in me in my 20s and 30s. This verse gets used a lot to say something like, hey, if you need something, don't worry, God will provide it. He owns all the cattle on 1,000 hills. Hey, you lack a little bit of money this month, don't worry, God will sell. I've heard people say this, I've probably said it, God will sell some of his cattle to provide for you. He owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. That is not the point of this text. The point of this text is not God's provision. The point of this text is the meaninglessness. Wow, let me try that again. The point of this text is the meaninglessness of sacrifices that the people are making without a heart that loves God. He goes, listen, are you kidding me? He goes, I don't need your sacrifices. He goes, I own all the cattle on 1,000 hill. Why would I need your offerings? He goes, if I was hungry, I wouldn't ask you for it. Your offerings don't provide for me food. So he's ripping them for these offerings that have been brought without the right heart. And he's telling them, I don't need your offerings. I own all the cattle. I don't need your offerings. It doesn't supply me food. So that's the point that he's trying to make. And then look what he says here in verse 14, offer to God a sacrifice of thanksgiving and perform your vows to God Most High. This might remind you of Psalm 51, where David says, you don't delight in burnt offerings or I would bring it. You don't delight in sacrifice or I would give it. The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and contrite heart you will not despise. God wants your heart before the sacrifice. Like the sacrifice means nothing. We'll get to that here at the end of the chapter as well. And he says, call upon me in the day of trouble, and then I will deliver you. But to the wicked, God says, what right do you have to recite my statutes or take my covenant on your lips? For you hate discipline and you cast my words behind you. If you see a thief, so this is the wicked, he says, if you see a thief, you're pleased with him and you keep company with adulterers. You give your mouth free rein for evil and your tongue frames deceit. You sit and speak against your brother and you slander your own mother's sons. These things you have done, and I have been silent, and you thought I was one like yourself. So this is interesting. That Israel and Judah are wicked and they're exceeding in their wickedness. And so God has not rebuked them for a little while. And so they're thinking, oh, see, God's just like us. He's fine with our wicked behavior. And God says, I've been silent and you thought that I was one like you, but now I will rebuke you and now I will lay the charge before you. Mark this then, you who have forgotten God, lest I tear you apart and there be none to deliver. Because if God destroys, no one can deliver, right? Because God is the deliverer. And so if God is against you, he's not your deliverer. And then he says this in verse 23, the one who offers thanksgiving as a sacrifice glorifies me, and to the one who orders his way rightly, I show the salvation of God. So the reason that God says I got the cattle on 1,000 hills is because he goes, I'm sick of your offerings. It's the same thing that he says in Isaiah chapter 1. In Isaiah 1, he says, I despise your offerings, I despise your festivals, I despise your feast days. He goes, I want righteousness overflowing from your heart. In Hosea 6:6, he says he desires mercy and not sacrifice. You might remember in 1 Samuel 15:22, when Samuel was rebuking King Saul, he says that God is more pleased with mercy. He's more pleased. Well, he says it this way. Sorry. It slipped my mind for a second. 1 Samuel 15, Samuel says to Saul, he goes, does God have as much delight in burnt offerings as he does with the heart, with the right attitude? And so all of this is about how the wicked have a wrong heart. And he's like, look, it's not your offerings that I'm complaining about. He goes, I have all the cattle on 1,000 hills. I'm not hungry. If I was hungry, I'd feed myself. And he goes, my problem is your heart. And so again, this comes back down to God worrying about the heart of the people who would follow him. And so this is the difference between the wicked and the righteous. The righteous offer their hearts to God, and the wicked are offering sacrifices with no heart, and God is not pleased with that. So that is Psalm 49 and 50. Join me tomorrow, and we will be in Psalm 69 and Psalm 109. And I know that those are far apart, but there's a reason for it, and I will show you that then. See you tomorrow. Thank you so much for journeying with us today at Simpler Bible. Together, you and I have looked at another passage of Scripture and come to know the Bible a little bit better and enjoy God more fully. This video, along with all of our videos, can be found at simplerbible.com, where you can enjoy our Through the Bible in a Year course. You can also enjoy a wealth of resources, blog posts that take you a little bit deeper into the text, a Bible study format that you can use with your small groups or your family, and we're creating new content all the time, all with the commitment to help us be people who know and enjoy God more fully. Thank you so much for being part of it, and we can't wait to see you next time.